Hey guys, so in this interview, I interviewed my friend Jared over a year ago. And what happened was I didn't know what I was doing, and I still don't know what I'm doing. And so my phone filled up, and I missed like 20, 30 minutes of the end of our conversation. So the interview actually stops kind of abruptly. But since then, he's actually gotten married. So we're going to actually, hopefully soon, we're going to have a second interview to see what has happened since he's left the Franciscans, entered into the dating world, and now is married and expecting a baby. So enjoy.
Your top secret questions.
I do have a scandal question. Just give me names. I want names. Anyways, cool. So I'm here with my friend Jared Weaver. I don't know if you want your last name. We can cut that out. So we met when we were working at Texas Rights Life, like forever ago.
10 years ago. This summer will be 10 years.
Yeah, and so, really?
Yeah.
Jeez, I've known you that long?
Mm-hmm. And I still talk to you.
Yeah. I allow you to talk to me. I usually begin with people just giving kind of like a quick bio, like where you're from, where you went to school, what you do for work.
Okay. Grew up in the Sugar Land area. Undergrads from Texas State. Have a master's, in communications with a business minor. Master's in theology from Franciscan. 18
Are we
credit.
supposed to drink for that? Like, no, that's a different. Other people do it.
I mean,
Other people
I
do
drink
that.
for everything, but no. 18 credits shy of dual master's degrees from Seaway. We'll get in Catholic University of America.
Okay, yeah.
We'll get into that later, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Been back in Houston for about 6.5 years now. Work in digital forensics and e-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Basically doing data collections for lawsuits.
Okay.
For oil and gas companies and large law firms.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
the data guy.
Yeah. And leave some space. We're drinking. What are we drinking? Sierra Nevada Bigfoot barley wine. It's so good. Oh yeah.
Cheers.
This is one of my favorite beers. It's so good.
That's awful.
Oh, dude, get out!
This is my house.
So the reason I want to meet with you is because the whole purpose of this YouTube channel is to get people's stories, especially stories most people won't hear unless they do this, sit down, have a beer, coffee, whatever, and discuss. But you were in seminary in formation to become a Franciscan for, was it a year?
Well, I was a Franciscan, but I was in formation to become a priest. Yeah. 3.5 years.
Okay, yeah.
Almost
so
3.5
years, okay. But, and we'll get to the story, but you just turned out and now you're single, ready to mingle or mingling. So I wanted to get to know like that story, kind of like how you got in, the discernment of you getting in, your experience of being a Franciscan, and then your discernment out and what life is like on the other side. So what was your discernment? How did you get into the Franciscans? Did you discern into celibacy first? Did you discern into the priesthood? Did you discern into Franciscans? Like, what came first?
That's a long answer. I'll hit the high notes. When I was in middle school, I got really involved at my parish at the time, and started to get to know like the youth minister and the priest, and was like, wow, like I have a lot of respect for the priesthood and for the priest, and it kind of like stuck in the back of my mind for a while, and then went through high school, went through college, and when I was in college at Texas State, I started to think like, there might be something to like the priesthood, go into it. Started looking into it a little bit and was like, no, I just want to be normal. Mm-hmm. And I was, I dated girls and all that, and had a girlfriend, and was like, no, that's not for me. And got out of college, worked for a year, started spiritual direction, and decided that I wanted to learn more about my faith. Because although I grew up Catholic, I didn't feel like I had as firm a foundation or as deep an understanding as I wanted. And I'd had some friends that had transferred up to Franciscan University. So I looked into it. So transferred up there, was on campus for 2 years, and my last semester studied in Rome. Mm-hmm. And while I was up there, I got to know the Franciscan TORs that run the university, and had many of them as professors, spiritual directors, friends. And
your last semester where?
I studied my last semester in Rome.
At Franciscan?
Well, they have a study abroad, or they did have a study abroad. Yeah.
Okay.
And so the master's degree students went to Rome.
Okay. Yeah. Normally I hear about the Austria one, but that's undergrad.
Correct.
Okay. Cool.
Correct. And they actually don't have the Rome program anymore. So there was a sliver of years, and I happened to.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it was semester of a lifetime. While I was there, I realized when I got back home, graduated, didn't have any real commitments, and thought, well, if I'm ever going to give this a serious look, I might as well do it now. So I went on a come and see weekend with the Franciscan TORs up in Loretto, Pennsylvania. And I remember driving away after the weekend and thinking, well, that felt like home. Oh, crap.
Damn it.
Yeah. And came back home and had a decision to make.
How old were you at the time?
Oh gosh, 28-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that, right around 28. Yeah, so applied, got in, went on the grand adventure, was in Pennsylvania at the Mother House property there for postulancy, novitiate, so not quite 2 years, a little under 2 years, and then transitioned to formal seminary in Washington, D.C., Catholic University of America. And it was a huge adjustment for me to go from Houston, Texas, a city of how many millions of people, to this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere with a stoplight, one stoplight.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of culture shock. And then just it was a big adjustment just in general to go from like professional, I'd gone from professional life to back to school, and now I was going into something completely different. And it was a rough adjustment. At first, my postulancy was pretty rough. When I entered novitiate.
How so? Or was it just the initial shock of?
Yeah, it was, there were 6 of us that came in together, and 3 were from out of state and 3 were local. And so it was interesting dynamics, and I didn't really know anybody up there. So it wasn't like I had close friends that I could hang out with. It was just kind of thrown into this. And then I wasn't used to having my life scheduled, to be honest. We had to be up for morning prayer and mass at a certain time, and then we had activities throughout the day, and then the end of the day, the day wasn't yours. Is what ultimately was part of the adjustment is, I belong to a community, and so we gather together for prayer. We have set times for meals and set times for prayer, and so, my life was scheduled pretty much from, I think it was like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I think 5 or 6 days a week, basically. And that took some getting used to, because it's given up your independence in a certain sense, or parts of it. And so that was a big adjustment. I eased into it a little bit, into the novitiate a little bit, but again, still just I think I was over the initial shock, and it was really starting to settle in. That's a year of prayer. You're set aside intentionally from family and friends. So I couldn't always just pick up the phone and call my brother or my family or my friends. And it's designed that way to help you focus on why you're there and what God's calling you to. Tremendous experience. I mean, how many people get to say they took a year off and basically prayed?
Yeah.
And then moved to DC the last year and a half-ish, and that was cool. That was interesting to live in DC. I definitely enjoyed being back in the university and being back in classes, and I did really well. But ultimately, I started to realize that wasn't where I was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And I'd struggled a little bit over the years, but particularly there, it was the summer of 2012, and the truth is I was depressed, and it wasn't until I was able to put my finger on why I was depressed, and I realized I was talking to our friend Matt, and out of my mouth, he was like, I didn't know you were still struggling, and out of my mouth comes, I just don't feel like I'm supposed to be a priest anymore. And it was like a relief. I'd finally figured out what was wrong, and so I took the next 3-4 months to basically that semester, and spiritual direction, talked to my formation director, even went to counseling just to basically make sure I had all my bases covered, and of course lots of prayer, and I really threw myself into the community life as well, just to make sure that when I left there, I didn't have any doubts or regrets or questions. And after 3-4 months of doing the things that I felt I needed to do, and in a certain sense what God was calling me to do, I left with a clear conscience and moved back home December 20th of 2012. Moved back to Houston and got into banking for a while, and then made the jump to digital forensics and e-discovery about almost 5 years ago now.
Yeah. Because I remember while you were out there, we were in Colorado. I remember talking a few times how it was rough. But I think a lot of it came back to just the community and or at least I think at that point you thought your biggest struggle was that. But through talking with Matt, you've got to the focus of it being I'm not actually. It's not all this. It's I'm not called the priesthood anymore. Yeah.
It's not there. It's here.
Yeah.
And so rattling around inside. So yeah.
Yeah, you had to I guess through direction and everything, you had to go through the tall grasses and figure out what is it actually, and not just all these other things.
Yeah.
Jumping back a little bit.
Sure.
What was it like prepping to leave? Because I remember the biggest thing I saw was you're huge into comics, not just reading but collecting comics, collecting toys, figures, all just the whole culture of it. So I remember the process you went through of selling, selling, getting rid of comics, toys, all that stuff. And you didn't get rid of all of it, but how much of it did you get rid of? Most of it.
Quite a bit. Yeah. And I didn't do it all at once.
Yeah.
I would come home. I would get a home visit for a week or two, at various stages within the formation, you get more or less time depending on where you are and what's going on. So I would make it a point when I came home to look through, okay, I'm going to look through my comics and figure out, I have 5 long boxes. Well, let's get it down to 3, or let's get it down to 2, or whatever. Or I have this collection of toys. Do I need those? Do I even touched those in years? And yeah, I got rid of most of my toy collection and most of my comic book collection. Now, I've built up the comics a little bit since I've been back.
Yeah,
but
and was it just that stuff, or were you getting rid of other of your belongings?
Oh yeah, I so what the savings that I had in the bank is what I lived on during postulancy, and so if I needed toiletries or stuff from the grocery, obviously our food was paid for and different things, but if there was anything extra that I wanted, or if I wanted comics, while I was up there, I actually was able to collect a little bit, but so I basically zeroed out my bank account by the end of that first year, and that was also I guess that was the start of kind of a minimalization and just kind of a decluttering of my life and just in general, or decluttering of possessions in general, and just looking at why do I have this? Do I need it? And what's its purpose?
Was that a requirement or just something you took on yourself? Because obviously, if you did go through it, you couldn't take all of that. But was that a
Correct.
requirement to have, on your own to detach from things you had, or was that something they recommended or expected from you?
There was a level of expectation, but it was also very open to what do you feel you need. So the TORs are, a lot of them are professors or teachers. So I knew that I could keep most of my books, and I wanted to keep most of my books because my plan, and actually this was coming to fruition right before I left, was to move towards being a university professor.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And that was my dream at the time. And so it was a lot easier for me to say, well, I don't need comics, I don't need toys, I don't need some of these other collections that I have. But I'm holding on to these books.
Yeah.
These are good references.
Yeah.
And it was, a lot of them were books that I had from my master's degree and were part of class materials and that sort of thing, and I just held on to them.
And I guess on top of it, they take about poverty. So I'm assuming you're
my
not
wardrobe was
supposed to have a lot of stuff.
correct. Yeah, my wardrobe was really easy.
Yeah.
My living quarters were, it was just simply a bedroom, with a bookshelf, and it was pretty simple. And to be honest, in some ways, I miss that because I didn't need a lot of the things. Like, you had a community kitchen, you had a community car, you had a community living room. Like, you didn't need.
You didn't have to
your own.
worry.
Yeah, and you didn't need so one of the things is sometimes we would donate our movies to the house, so like DVDs back then, and so that was kind of cool. Like, you build up a community library in the formation
You have
house,
to filter
and it's
through
like
those DVDs.
yeah, well,
You can't have this one.
yeah, it's true, but it was good.
That is interesting. Were there DVD how, to what extent would the DVD collection go? You know what I mean? Like PG-13, R. Okay, if it's R, then we can't have this stuff in it. How did that go into the thought?
A lot of it was, looking back on my experience and what I remember, was that a lot of it was personal choice. So
y'all had a library and you can watch it or not. Oh. Interesting. So what was could you give a quick run through of, because I'm very bad at this, the quick run through of lack of a better term, different years in your formation? So you said postulant, novitiate.
Sure.
I'm terrible at knowing all those different steps.
Postulancy was the first 9 months, and you're not technically part of the order, and it's basically like a come and see period. And they had us doing things like, our main ministry was, working at the local Catholic school that had kindergarten through 8th grade. And so we were teachers' assistants, essentially. And that was great. It was wonderful. It gave us something to do, to get out of the house and to be of service to the community. And it was a great experience. Novitiate is a year and a day by canonical law, and can be longer, but it must be at least a year and a day. And it's really a time of setting yourself apart from the world. And you are, we were invested with the habit, a simplified religious habit, novitiate habit, and become part of the order. And we had a little bit of flexibility on what our ministry or ministries were. I worked at a soup kitchen, and it was phenomenal. Me and one of the brothers from my class would go. I can't remember if it was once or twice a week, something like that. But they intentionally don't give you a full schedule that year, because they want you to have free time for prayer and in some sense leisure. Now that might not, when I say leisure, I don't mean like just to go and do whatever you want, but really to build a community. We had also in-house classes learning about St. Francis and the history of the order, and St. Clare and some of the other Franciscan saints, and that were taught by the novitiate director, one of the formation directors. And So, I mean, unaccredited classes, so to speak, but again, laying a good solid foundation of what you're joining, the history of the order, the history of the founder, those sorts of things. And then after novitiate, you move into formal seminary, and that's where you're similar to a diocesan seminarian. You know, you're getting your formal studies, you're meeting the bishop's requirements for education for priesthood, if you're going to be a priest, or if you're going to be a brother, they may have you specialize in a certain type of degree, depending on what your conversations have been with the formation director. And so that is at that point that also important note, after novitiate, you take temporary vows. And so from that point, you're living a vowed life. You get the full habit. You're, again, part of the order.
Did you get that far? Okay. So you took your temporary vows?
Yep.
Okay.
I was in temporary vows for a year and a half, and then I was dispensed once I left.
So after you discerned out, you were being called to priesthood, and I'm assuming also not being called to be a brother.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
What was your return like? Like coming back home, coming back to family, coming back to friends, trying to find. I mean, personally, like what was that like?
Huge transition. I mean, I remember being nervous about going back to my parish because for 3.5 years I had been the guy that was in a habit, you know, and I was scared to death of people recognizing me and being like, "What happened?" and what, you know, and just that sort of thing. And it was rough at first. I mean, I'm fortunate and I'm very grateful that I had family to come home to and good friends that supported me and understood, and not everybody's that fortunate. And by the grace of God, my brother had he had some networking connections, so I had a job waiting for me basically when I came home.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I came home, I had an in-person interview and then started like a week or two later. And so I think I was without a job maybe 2 weeks after I moved home. So grace of God, like, you know, he took care of me.
Now you said you're blessed to have that. Not everyone has that experience. Do you know guys who have had maybe like the opposite experience?
Yeah, I was not the only one that had left, or that had left while I was there. I'd seen, I think I was like the sixth one within the span of 6 months, 8 months, something like that. And that was another thing that was very hard, is most of those guys that left I was close to. And to see, you know, brothers leave, you know, these guys that you in a certain sense have been in the trenches with and have been in ministries with and have really gotten to know, and they're either choosing to walk out or they're being asked to leave. And in a certain sense that goes to the nature of that sort of vocation. You know, it's a what they call a mutual discernment. You're discerning, do I belong? And the community is discerning, do you fit?
Yeah.
And so I know that there were guys that had left that didn't have good family, a good stable family life that they could reinsert to, and so I mean, that was one of the huge blessings for me is, you know, particularly my mom's side, we have a big extended family that's very close, and everybody was just happy to have me home. You know, they were, I think, a little sad, but they also understood, and they also knew that this meant that they get to see me a lot more than, you know, 1 week a year or whatever it was going to be.
After going through seminary, 2.5, 3 years, being in formation, how has the church scandal, how's it affected you? How have you viewed it? Do you think having actually gone through seminary gives you a different experience of it from people who haven't? Take those however you want.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, there's no excuse. Like, there have been various abuses of, you know, boys, girls, men, women. The whole thing is deplorable and inexcusable. But you also, I mean, I saw every day. I lived with priests. I lived with brothers. Let me be clear: the ones that I lived with were no problems. There was nothing like that going on. But you just like when you live in a house of 20 people, you know, you irritate each other sometimes, or you know, things aren't always rosy. So having had that experience of going through seminary, of living devout life, and living in a community, you know, priests, seminarians are real people, and I think sometimes people forget that or put them up on a pedestal and those sorts of things, and ultimately they're just people, and we're all sinful. So I can't say I'm completely shocked, given what's come out in the last 20 years, that there was more of it. I'd had, it was just one of those things that, yeah, I mean, I'd had some experiences of particular groups within seminary that I had started to notice, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird, or that's not exactly, it doesn't seem like they're necessarily following church teaching, or I'm trying to be very vague on purpose. So does it shock me? No. Am I horrified? Yes. Like there's no room for that in Christ's church.
I guess I mean more like has it, because I'm not looking for names, like give me a list.
Yeah.
But it's affected people's faith and trust in the church. So I'm just curious if as a you know, former seminarian, if maybe you think your faith might have been affected more or less because you know the reality of we're all humans. Does that make sense? Like just how have you been with your faith journey, and this is going on in my church that I almost literally gave my life to.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Satan is alive and active within our world and within the church, because we're all flawed, sinful people. But you know, to go straight to the catechism, the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith, and at a somewhat early age, probably high school, college, like my undergrad, I realized like I was searching and looking and as far as faith and religion and that sort of thing, and I realized that the Eucharist is the truth. And while yes, there's a lot more to our faith, like that's the pivotal teaching and the pivotal person of our faith, you know, Jesus.
Source and summit.
Yeah. And so the scandals don't really shake me as far as like my faith, because my faith is in Jesus, it's in his church, it's in the sacraments, it's in the Eucharist. I'd say more than anything, what it's made me do is convicted me that I need to remain in Jesus. I need to go to Mass as much as possible. I need to continue to grow spiritually, to pray, to have a prayer life, an active prayer life, and because I guarantee you that none of those men were like, you know what, one day I really want to commit some egregious acts and you know, crimes. No, that's not how anybody starts. But it's little decisions, it's daily decisions, it's you know, those little things that turn into big things, whether that's good or that's bad.
I see this mostly with people who have been like missionaries for a year or two or however long, whether it's Focus or Net or something, when they come out, when they were in their mission, whatever work they were doing within the church, some groups and organizations have a very regimented prayer life. Like you're getting holy hour at this time, you and your team pray together at this time, rosary, all this stuff. And at least your first year, like was novitiate also very, I know you had more
very
free time,
yes.
but still very structured.
Yes.
How was it for you coming out? And I know one of the struggles some people have is thinking they can continue what they had during that mission. like I'm going to continue the whole hour every day and whatever, but it's not realistic because that's the life of someone going through seminary or a missionary is not your life anymore. So it can't look like that because you have other obligations, work, family, whatever. So what was it like for you to come out? And did you struggle with that? Like, oh, I need to keep this up, or finding your daily groove of prayer and your own devotion, mass, all that?
Yeah, I think you have to find your new plan for life, your new prayer regimen. The Liturgy of the Hours is great, and I still aspire to pray at least night prayer every night, just to help me wind down my day and turn my thoughts back to God before bed, and in a certain sense to pray an act of contrition for the sins of the day. But it has definitely taken me, it took a couple of years to really get a firm, a new foundation, if you will. So now I generally start my day with 30 minutes of quiet prayer. Oftentimes I'll pray the rosary on my commute to the office, and then wrap up my day with, at the very least, act of contrition, if not night prayer, and try to go to Mass, or my goal is to go to daily Mass at least once during the week. And I've been convicted lately that if the Eucharist is what I truly, if we truly believe in the Eucharist, then why would we not want to go to daily Mass every day? And that's not possible for me. Some days, just I'm at the office and I can't. It's just not realistic. But I'm also very fortunate. I work downtown. Holy Cross Chapel is great. They have 2 midday masses, so sometimes I'll take my lunch hour and run down for Mass. But it took me a while to get there and to kind of put those pieces together to form my prayer life. I did try to hang on to praying the office for a while, and it was causing stress for me, and I was just kind of like, well, this isn't what kind of like what you're saying, like this isn't what my prayer life has to be. Like, this is a beautiful gift and prayer that the church has given us, and I love it, but at the same time, it's not always the best way for me to pray.
So how long did it take for you to start dating?
Oh,
From the time you got home till, like, let's say...
That's a...
My first day back, I called her up.
No. I had a girlfriend within about 6 months. Yeah. And so that was interesting as well, because I'd never really dated as a professional. Like, I'd had...
Professional dater?
No,
I don't
no. I'd had a girlfriend in college.
Yeah.
But pretty much, and then I'd gone on a few dates when I was at Franciscan. So it was more of the dating at school, so to
versus
speak.
work.
Yeah. And so it was like, oh, I feel called to marriage, as I still do. And okay, well, I guess I got to put myself out there. So I started getting on some of the Catholic dating sites and started putting myself out there to meet people. And
What age is this?
31.
Okay.
Yeah, 30, 31, something like that.
How does, being away, because you were gone for like 3 years, living a life of celibacy, what was it like, I guess, coming, at one point, I'm called to priesthood, a few years later, okay, I'm not. So at that point, I was looking at a lifetime of celibacy, coming back to when I'm called to married life, entering the dating scene. And what was there a struggle? Was there like, I don't know, was that weird? I don't.
It was an adjustment. I mean, it was like anything. I had to learn how to date. I had to learn how to be in a relationship, to communicate with women in a dating context. I had to put in the time to learn how to do it well, I guess. And I mean, like many things, I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
But
because I guess like I think of people have this idea of celibacy like, well, just this magic happens. They're not attracted to women, but I mean that's not true. Like just because you're called celibacy or at least celibacy for a time, like women are still gorgeous, and you weren't like locked away like you were working in a school. I'm sure you worked amongst women, but now you just had to re-enter into, I guess, entering into relationships with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the key, is going from having a certain distance and a certain separation from women and from any interactions with women to, oh wait, I have to take down that wall and get to know these women and in a romantic context, and how do I do that, and how do I do that within the context of what God teaches, theology of the body and those sorts of things, because you're in a relationship, in a certain sense, you're somewhat responsible for the other person's soul. And I mean, granted, it's not marriage, it's not sacrament, but there's a certain responsibility there to the other, and to lead them closer to God and not further away. So it was kind of taking all that in and doing the best that you can.
At what point in the conversation I was a Franciscan for 3 years. At what point did that come up?
It still comes up, bro.
Well, I mean, like how far into the conversation? I was a Franciscan.
It depends on the context of where I'm meeting them. I've done the online dating thing.
Does that go on your profile?
Sometimes. Yeah. For some, sometimes it does.
It might be really good on those
Catholic sites. Yeah. And it's one of those things that you gauge, and I've had good experiences when I've told women that, and I've had bad experiences when I've told women that.
Why bad? What's the reaction?
Just they kind of look at you like you have two heads or something. Like, oh,
you did what?
You weirdo. Because it can be shocking, and some people don't understand it, and having to explain that. So, it is what it is. It's part of who I am, and I wouldn't change it. It's made me a better man, certainly a holier man. I like to think, anyway. Both my master's in theology and then being a brother. I wouldn't be who I am today without those experiences.
I want to jump into that. How has your time with the Franciscans affected who you are now and what you're trying to do and achieve? That you may not have, maybe you wouldn't have had if you hadn't gone to seminary.
Well, I think first and foremost, my prayer life, what I was talking about. I really worked. I was forced into a prayer structure there, but I grew to love it. And some days I'm like, man, that'd be nice. I miss those set times of prayer and that set structure and those sorts of things. I also learned a lot about. I was a chaplain at a retirement community my last summer. So being able to walk with people during some very difficult times in their lives, and taught me a lot about empathy and compassion, and how to be compassionate and empathetic, and also just reminding me that people are just people. And I've been fortunate to meet some amazing people that I never would have. Bishops, cardinals, different things like that. But I've also had the unbelievable experience to be able to serve and to walk with homeless people or people that are dying because of my time with the Franciscans. And, those are experiences that I carry with me and memories that I carry with me, and that, there's situations every week that I kind of pull back and remind myself, well, put yourself in their shoes. Or, what do you think they're feeling? or try to see where they're coming from, those sorts of things. So a lot of those are skills that I acquired or honed with the Franciscans.
Mm-hmm. So now, what are we having? This is the St. Arnold
19.
Divine Reserve 19.
Ooh, that's good.
That is good. I don't know which one.
I like that
What
better.
type of beer this one is?
I don't know. I just threw the bottle away.
'Cause it's a different one every year.
I know. It's delicious. That's what kind of beer it is.
That's so good. Okay.
Let's go back. Post intermission.
What was it like, or what has it been like trying to date women, but also having your belief in what the church teaches with theology of the body and saving sex for marriage and not cohabitating prior to marriage? Like, what's it like trying to find someone to spend your life with those views, and then maybe they don't have the same views?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first and foremost, we're all sinners. Like, I don't consider myself to be any different or any better than anybody else. And what's key is honesty and humility and communication, because there are sometimes some uncomfortable situations, but what I always strive to do is explain why I believe what I believe. And
can you define uncomfortable situations?
I'd rather not.
Well, like, I'm assuming like things might start happening. A little kissy kiss. I'll cut that.
Yeah, let's cut that part out. I don't want to answer that part. Not on camera, anyway. No, sure. Sometimes there are prompts for conversations, for communication. Whether you're sometimes it's just a matter of discussing the faith and like, hey, this is who I am. I'm Catholic. I'm going to church on Sunday. You can come with me. That sort of thing. Sometimes it's we're making dinner at somebody's place and watching a movie, and you have to kind of say, hey, these are my boundaries, and I appreciate if you respect them, and they're gonna be respected, basically, or not in a mean way, but just this isn't this is who I am, and these are certain things and behaviors I'm not gonna do. And I also try to explain that it's done with respect to them as well. Nobody likes to be used. Nobody wants to have that question in the back of their mind. So I try to put it in a context of not only this is what the church teaches, this is what I believe, but this is why. And thankfully, I mean, there's a lot of great Catholic women out there, and they understand that and they respect that, and they're on the same page with that. I just haven't found the right one yet.
Have you experienced like a bad situation where someone was just like, F you, like, I'm not into that, like?
Not so much like being told off like that, but I know that I have dated some women that, because of my beliefs and that I held fast to them, it ended. I got we're just very different people.
Yeah.
I was like, and there was a particular context for that conversation that it was like, okay, well, I know exactly what you're getting at, and that's fine. Like,
yeah. Thanks for your honesty.
Yeah. Cool, we'll part ways.
Yeah. Now, did you do a lot of dating prior to, so like high school, college, like in that time prior to entering to the Franciscans?
I'd had a couple of girlfriends.
Okay.
I mean, I had like a long-term girlfriend in high school.
Okay. There's a reason I'm asking.
Girlfriend in college.
Okay.
I dated a little bit when I was working, and then when I was at Franciscan. A little bit. I mean, it's a lot different than it is now.
That's what I want to get at. Like, granted, that was a different time of your life. You're doing different things. But there was that time where you were working. but just like friends of mine who are younger and in the dating scene, yourself, and especially on the male side, because I think from what I've heard in conversations, women, I guess in our age bracket, have issues with dating in men for one reason, and then men have their issues. Those who are really intentionally looking to find someone good, like live out the faith and be married. Men usually have a different issue. Before I get to that, like, do you see a difference in just the dating world or the art of dating, how you date from then? So, let's just say college onward, prior to going to the Franciscans, versus now.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, the world's totally different than it was 10 years ago. And within a school environment, you're interacting with men and women are interacting all the time. Classes, hanging out with friends, maybe joining a group or an organization, and so it's a lot different than once you're out of college and you're in the professional world. And most of my friends are married now, and so it's how do I avail myself of opportunities to ask a good woman out on a date, and it's whether that's online dating, whether that's going to some sort of networking events or singles events, or women at church or people friends are introduced me to. I definitely I don't exclusively date Catholic women, but that's definitely something that is what I'm looking for. If that makes sense.
So, like, being Catholic or not isn't necessarily a deal breaker for you.
That's tough to answer. I try to be open to seeing where something could go and see where God's leading. An interaction. So I've gone on dates with women that aren't Catholic. Clearly those haven't worked out, but neither have the ones with the Catholic women.
Yeah.
So I try to let God do His thing, because the analogy I like to use is I'm not going to carry around a picture frame and try to find the right picture. God's going to give me the picture, and I got to go build the frame. So I try not to be super restrictive and come at, I have these requirements.
I've got to find this person.
Yeah, because guess what? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And that's over the years I've learned that, these qualities are great, and I think top of my list is, I want a Catholic wife. Like, don't get me wrong. But if, am I open to the possibility? Yeah. How many times in the scriptures does, God call people together that, maybe wouldn't have been normally matched up, or, wouldn't have seen eye to eye, and so.
Yeah, because I think the big thing is, and I saw there's a girl who has a channel, I think her name is Lizzie Reezy, she's a convert, and she had a really cool video where she talked about how most people are trying to find who they're most compatible with, but it's like, who's compatible? Like, because
what are your criteria? Because your criteria could be wrong.
Yeah, because you could be like totally compatible on paper, but like be the worst combination of people. Because there's gonna be something about the other person that irks you, or just
of course
grinds against. Yeah. So I guess it's just what works.
Yeah. Well, and I'm always trying to read and learn and shape my mind, my spirit, or spiritual life. So sometimes I'll pick up a dating book and read and try to look at what can this book teach me. And sometimes they're Christian dating books, and sometimes they're secular dating books, and it varies. But sometimes they challenge your paradigm of love. What funnel are you trying to squeeze love into, and where is there room for you to widen that funnel, or to maybe not use a funnel? Are you thinking of love as this, when really love is this. And, an interesting thing during Lent, Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
during Lent, during this past Lent, I really, for the first time in my life, played around with fasting. I shouldn't say played around, but really did fasting and looked at that and fasting for other people. And
like going beyond the designated obligations.
Yeah, whether that's not eating or just eating one meal, just playing around with that sort of thing and offering sacrifices for, offering that as a sacrifice for people.
How many did you offer for me?
I'll tell you later. But it gets to the sacrificial nature of our calling. I mean, I put that in the context of what we're talking about dating is I had somebody ask me the other day, like, do you think you're ready for marriage? It's like, well, I don't know if I'm ever ready for marriage.
Who's ready for marriage?
Yeah. But I'm starting to realize the extent of what I could be called to sacrifice as a man in a relationship, and I go back to that this famous reading that's in so many weddings about husbands obey your wives, and everybody all the husbands are like elbowing the wives like, did you hear that? And then it's like, yeah, but you missed the next line, like
wives obey your husbands.
Wives obey your husbands, and then it's husbands, be prepared to lay down your life like Christ did for his church, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What is that?
Gotta die.
Yeah, exactly. And while that may mean literally die, it's going to mean probably daily sacrificing for another. And wow, we just got way off. But these are just some of the musings that I have about dating.
Yeah. Getting back to the question I asked before, like obviously the forms of dating and finding someone, setting up a date have changed with all the apps and websites and all this stuff. Do you see a difference in people being different from when you were dating a girl back then, trying to ask her out, the conversations you had versus girls now and what they're looking for now at this age, at this time in your life?
Well, if I knew what women were looking for now, I probably wouldn't be single.
Well, okay. Let me put it out there.
But I think I get what you're saying. And as as a guy who's a little bit older and dating women, that are a little bit older, that are professionals, your mindset's different. What you're looking for is different. Your realizations of, I don't need to. I'm not just looking for somebody that I'm infatuated with. Like, no, I'm really looking for a woman of substance. And kind of getting back to like what I was talking about before, like I'm not so much looking for characteristics on paper. Like I'm looking for how do I get along with this person? Is this a person that in 10 years I'll be just happy sitting around, talking to, making dinner with, figuring out life, working through life with, that I am now. It's not all about sparks and chemistry and all the romantic Hollywood, Hallmark and romantic comedy type stuff. That's great, but most of that, both from my personal experience and then from married people, I hear most of that kind of fizzles anyway. I mean, sure, there are those times, but everyday life is not always sunshine and roses and that sort of thing.
I guess what I mean, and that's good. I guess what I mean is like, and I've had a couple guys say this, so it may have just been a couple guys with bad experiences, but and again, this is like painting with a broad brush, but some experiences I know guys have had is at this age in a dating area within the, let's just say the Catholic, the Christian sphere, it seems like the guys I know who are interacting with them find that a lot of times in that sphere, especially women who are trying to interact only in that sphere, they'll say they're looking for a rich guy, or
World's most handsome Catholic man.
or like once they find a flaw, they're done. Like they're looking for that perfect, sinless Catholic guy. It's like once there's a flaw, or you drop an F-bomb or something, like
Well, fuck that.
yeah, like it's over. Like I don't know if that might have just been the two guys, or have you seen that?
I've definitely seen it. And that's tough to comment on. I mean, have I experienced what I think that was? Yes. What do I really know that for sure? Who knows? I mean, I can tell you I've been told that I don't fit X, Y, and Z, and that's what they were looking for. And I mean, that makes me think kind of like what you're saying, like, oh, well, because I'm not blank, or because I do blank, you're just going to write me off without really getting to know me. And I hate that. Like, that's... I don't hate that just because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm being rejected, but I hate that because I feel like we're shortchanging each other. And you know, there are, I'm sure there are women out there that in a certain sense I've done that too. You know, let me be clear about that. I'm no saint. I'm not perfect. But I think when you give it a little more time, or you really try to get to know somebody on not just a simple superficial level, you know, like, well, do you meet these, you know, these are my 10 requirements. Do you meet these? Like, it's not a job interview.
Yeah.